The stars have always been patient. They burn for billions of years, watching civilizations rise from the mud of young worlds, reach toward the void with trembling hands, and then, more often than not, fall silent again. The galaxy remembers everything and mourns nothing. It has seen empires that spanned 10,000 systems crumble into dust and legend. It has watched species that mastered the fabric of reality itself simply vanish, leaving behind only ruins that younger races would one day mistake for the work of gods. I have lived long enough to understand this now, long enough to see my own people begin that same slow fade into cosmic irrelevance. My name is Kethverani Seldris, and I am old. Old even by the standards of the Velkari ascendancy, a civilization that counted its history in tens of thousands of years before humanity's ancestors had learned to chip stone into tools. I have served as fleet coordinator for 3 centuries, watching our ships patrol the quiet lanes between stars, maintaining order in a galaxy that had long since accepted our supremacy as natural law. We were wrong about so many things, but we were most catastrophically wrong about Earth. I remember the first time I saw a human. It was during one of our routine surveys of the outer spiral arm, that unfashionable region of the galaxy where young species sometimes flickered into existence before burning themselves out. The survey team had flagged the 3rd planet of an unremarkable yellow star, noting the presence of primitive radio emissions and crude chemical propulsion vehicles. The assessment was brief and dismissive. Pre-warp civilization, aggressive tendencies. Self-destructive social structures. Probability of natural extinction within 2,000 cycles, 73.6%. Recommend observation only. I signed off on that assessment without a second thought. We had catalogued thousands of such species. Most never survived long enough to matter. That was 400 of their years ago. I was so certain then, so confident in the natural order that it held for millennia. The Velkari watched, the Velkari guided, the Velkari endured. Lesser species rose and fell like waves against an eternal shore, and we remained, serene in our superiority. Now I stand on the observation deck of the Refuge of Sorrows, watching the stars drift past, and I feel something I have not felt in centuries. Fear. Not the sharp, immediate fear of battle. I have known that intimately these past months. This is something deeper, something cold and patient, like the void itself has taken up residence in my chest. The Refuge is one of the last great vessels of the Velkari fleet. Once we commanded thousands of such ships. Now I can count our surviving capital vessels on my manipulator digits, and I would have fingers left over. The war with the hierarchy of consuming shadows has taken everything from us. 18 core worlds burned to cinders. The great archives of Velketh Prime, containing 60,000 years of accumulated knowledge, reduced to expanding clouds of radioactive debris. Billions of my people, scientists, artists, children, elders who remembered the old songs, all gone, all silent. And still the hierarchy comes. They are not conquerors in any sense we understood. They do not want our worlds or our resources or our submission. They want only our extinction, and they pursue it with a patience that mirrors the stars themselves. Coordinator Seldris, The voice comes from behind me, soft with exhaustion. I turn to see Velmari, my aide, her normally luminescent skin dimmed to a tired gray. The council has reached a decision.
And?
She hesitates. That hesitation tells me everything. They have authorized the final consultation. I feel my secondary heart skip a beat. The final consultation. We swore we would never invoke that protocol, never humble ourselves before the younger races, never admit that the Valkyrie ascendancy had fallen so far that we required assistance. Which species? I ask, though some part of me already knows the answer. Velmari's eyes meet mine, and I see reflected there the same fear that coils in my own chest. The humans, Coordinator. The Council believes they are our only remaining option. The humans. Of course. How bitterly ironic that the species we once dismissed as self-destructive primitives had somehow become the most rapidly expanding power in the known galaxy. In 400 years, barely a heartbeat by Valkyrie standards, they had spread from a single world to over 200 systems. They had developed technologies that made our scientists mutter in confused frustration. They had fought 3 major wars against established galactic powers, and won each one through methods that defied conventional military doctrine. And yet they remained. Strange. Unpredictable. They had not conquered the species they defeated. They had somehow absorbed them, integrated them, turned former enemies into allies through means we could not fully comprehend. Their government, if it could even be called that, was a chaotic web of overlapping authorities and competing interests that should have collapsed under its own inefficiency centuries ago. But it hadn't. They hadn't. Against all logic, against all our careful predictions, humanity had not only survived, but thrived. "Prepare my shuttle," I said, my voice steadier than I felt, "and compile all relevant data on human diplomatic protocols. If we are to beg for our survival, we should at least do so correctly." The journey to Sol system took 11 days. 11 days of watching the stars slide past, of reviewing intelligence reports that only deepened my unease. 11 days of remembering the faces of colleagues who would never return from the battles we had lost, of composing and discarding 100 different approaches to what I was about to attempt. I was not alone on this mission. The Council had insisted on sending a full diplomatic delegation, or what passed for one in these desperate times. 7 Valkyrie, all that could be spared from the war effort, crowded into a ship designed for 3. Velmari remained at my side, her loyalty unwavering despite her obvious terror. The others were specialists, cultural analysts, military liaisons, a single xenolinguist who had studied human communication patterns. None of them had ever met a human in person, neither had I. We dropped out of warp at the edge of the Sol system, in accordance with the coordinates the humans had provided in their terse response to our request for asylum. I had expected... I don't know what I had expected. Defensive platforms, perhaps, weapons arrays, some demonstration of the military power that had humbled older civilizations than ours. Instead, there was only silence and stars. "Coordinator?" Velmari's voice was uncertain. "I'm detecting a single vessel on approach, small, unarmed as far as our sensors can determine." I studied the approaching ship on our display. It was blocky, utilitarian, utterly lacking in the elegant lines that characterized Valkyrie design philosophy. It looked like something a species might build if they had no conception of aesthetics whatsoever, purely functional, almost aggressively plain. "They're hailing us," Velmari reported. On screen. The face that appeared was surprisingly ordinary. A human female, middle-aged by their brief standards, with skin the color of dark wood and hair cropped close to her skull. She wore a simple uniform of muted blue, devoid of medals or insignia. Her expression was calm, patient, the look of someone who had all the time in the world. "Coordinator Seldris," she said. Her pronunciation of my name was imperfect but comprehensible. "I'm Captain Sarah Okonkwo of the Solo Transit Authority. Welcome to Sol. I'll be escorting you to the reception station. Please follow my vessel and maintain your current speed. The journey will take approximately 4 hours. 4 hours. A crawl through the outer system at speeds our ships could have covered in minutes. Were they being cautious? Or was this some kind of test? "Captain Okonkwo," I replied, choosing my words with care. "We appreciate your welcome. May I ask why we are proceeding at such measured velocity?" A slight smile crossed her features. "Regulations, Coordinator. The inner system has heavy traffic. We find it's best for everyone if we don't rush." Heavy traffic. In my experience, species that emphasize the density of their traffic were usually compensating for weaknesses elsewhere. I filed the observation away and gave the order to follow. The 4 hours that followed were among the strangest of my long life. As we moved deeper into the Sol system, the heavy traffic Captain Okonkwo had mentioned began to materialize around us. At first, it was merely scattered, cargo vessels moving between the outer planets, mining operations in the asteroid belt, the occasional passenger liner. Nothing remarkable, nothing that would have given me pause under normal circumstances. But the deeper we went, the more the traffic thickened, and thickened, and thickened. By the time we passed the orbit of Mars, our sensors were tracking over 40,000 individual vessels. Not warships, I saw vanishingly few of those. These were freighters and tankers, construction platforms and mobile habitats, research stations and communications relays. The sheer industrial activity was staggering. I watched a convoy of ore haulers pass us, each one larger than any commercial vessel the Valkyrie had ever built, moving with the casual coordination of a species that had been doing this for centuries rather than decades. "Coordinator," Velmari whispered, her voice carrying a tremor I had never heard before. I'm reading permanent habitation structures throughout the asteroid belt. Thousands of them, possibly tens of thousands." "Population estimate?" She was silent for a long moment, her manipulator digits dancing across her console. "I cannot determine with accuracy. The structures vary enormously in size and configuration, but based on thermal signatures and communication density," she trailed off. "Valmori." "At minimum, Coordinator. At absolute minimum. 3 billion individuals in the belt alone." I felt my primary heart stutter. 3 billion. In the asteroid belt. That was twice the surviving population of the entire Valkyrie ascendancy, and this was merely one region of one system. Humanity's home system, yes, but just one of over 200 they now controlled. How had we missed this? How had our intelligence services failed so completely to grasp the scale of what was happening here? As if reading my thoughts, Captain Okonkwo's voice crackled over the communication channel. "First time in Sol, Coordinator?" "Yes," I admitted. "It gets busier the closer you get to Earth. The inner system's always been our most developed region. Old habits, I suppose. Even after 400 years of expansion, most humans still want to live within a few light minutes of the homeworld." She paused. "It's a bit crowded for my tastes. I prefer the colonies myself. More room to breathe." "More room to breathe?"
She spoke of hundreds of light-years of colonized space as casually as I might mention a pleasant garden.
We passed the orbit of Earth's moon, and I saw the homeworld for the first time with my own eyes. It was beautiful, heartbreakingly so. Blue and white and green, wrapped in a thin shell of atmosphere that seemed impossibly fragile, given the violence I knew lay in its history. Around it swarmed countless stations and platforms, the accumulated infrastructure of a species that had clawed its way up from extinction more than once. Our destination was not Earth itself, but a station orbiting at a considerable distance, a sprawling, modular structure that Captain Okonkwo identified as Reception Platform 17. The name suggested there were at least 16 others. Probably more. We docked without incident. The human technology was cruder than ours in many ways, but it functioned with a reliability that spoke of practical experience rather than theoretical elegance. A delegation was waiting for us in the docking bay. 5 humans, all dressed in the same understated manner as Captain Okonkwo. No honor guard, no ceremony. Just 5 individuals standing patiently, their expressions polite and unreadable. The one in front stepped forward as I descended the boarding ramp. A male human, older, with pale skin and gray hair, and eyes the color of a winter sky. Coordinator Seldris, I'm Ambassador Thomas Chen, United Earth Diplomatic Corps. On behalf of humanity, I welcome you to Seoul. He extended his hand. I had been briefed on this gesture, and I carefully clasped it with my primary manipulator.
His grip was firm, but not aggressive. His skin was warm, almost uncomfortably so by Vilcari standards. But it was his eyes that caught my attention. They were measuring me, I realized, cataloging, analyzing, assessing. Behind that mild exterior, this human was taking my measure with a precision I found deeply unsettling.
Ambassador Chen, I replied. Thank you for receiving us. I must apologize for the irregular nature of our request. No apology necessary, Chen said. He released my hand and gestured toward a corridor leading into the station. Please come with me. We have quarters prepared for your delegation. I imagine you could use some rest after your journey. Rest? As if I could rest while the last remnants of my civilization burned in a war we were losing. But I inclined my head politely and followed him into the station. The quarters were comfortable enough, though decorated with a simplicity that bordered on asceticism. No artwork, no luxury furnishings, just clean lines, efficient spaces, and technology that worked without flourish. After centuries of Vilcari aesthetics, the flowing curves, the living lights, the subtle harmonies of color and form, the human approach felt almost deliberately plain. Ambassador Chen left us to settle in, promising to return in a few hours for what he called preliminary discussions. I sent the rest of my delegation to their quarters and stood alone by the observation port, watching the distant blue marble of Earth turn slowly against the stars. You seem troubled, Coordinator. Velmari had remained behind, her voice quiet. More than I would expect from fatigue alone. I am troubled, I admitted. Something is wrong here, Velmari. Not wrong in the sense of danger, at least not immediate danger, but something is not as I expected. The scale of their development? That, yes, but more than that. I turned to face her. We have studied humans for 400 years. We have observed their expansion, analyzed their conflicts, cataloged their technologies. We thought we understood them. And now? Now I am certain we understood nothing. I returned my gaze to the distant Earth. Tell me, Velmari, what do you see when you look at this system, at these humans? She was quiet for a long moment. I see. Industry. efficiency. A species that has used every scrap of their home system, every asteroid, every moon. But that alone is not remarkable. The hierarchy has done the same in their core territories.
Look closer.
Another pause. Their ships are functional, unadorned. They build for purpose, not for display. Her voice shifted, carrying a note of realization. They are not trying to impress us.
Exactly. I felt a chill run through my secondary nervous system. Every spacefaring species we have ever encountered has used its home system as a showcase, a demonstration of power, of culture, of capability. Even in decline, even in desperation, species take pride in their appearance. They want to be seen, respected, feared. I gestured toward the station around us, but the humans show us utility, simplicity. They show us exactly what they think we need to see and nothing more.
Perhaps they have nothing to show.
Do you believe that?
Velmari was silent. We both knew the answer.
Ambassador Chen returned 4 hours later, as promised. He led me, alone, at his polite suggestion, to a small conference room overlooking the Earth. The room was empty save for a simple table and 2 chairs, positioned so that we faced each other with the planet visible through the window behind him. "Please sit," he said. "Would you care for refreshment? I'm told we have some beverages that are not entirely unpleasant to Velkari physiology." "No, thank you." I sat across from him, studying his face. "Ambassador, I must be direct. My people are dying. The hierarchy of consuming shadows has destroyed 18 of our core worlds in the past 3 cycles. Our fleet has been reduced to less than 1/10 of its former strength. We estimate that without intervention, the Velkari ascendancy will cease to exist within 5 of your years." Chen nodded slowly. His expression did not change. "We're aware of the situation, Coordinator. Our intelligence services have been monitoring the conflict." "Then you understand why we have come. The Velkari Council has authorized me to request—" I hesitated, the words bitter on my tongue. "To request military assistance from the United Earth government. We are prepared to offer significant concessions in exchange. Territory, technology, whatever you require." The human was quiet for a long moment. Then, unexpectedly, he asked, "Coordinator, how old are you?" I blinked, thrown by the apparent non sequitur. "I have lived for 734 of your years."
And how long have you served as fleet coordinator?
3 centuries.
Chen leaned back in his chair. "In that time, how many species have you watched rise and fall?" 17 have achieved spaceflight in my lifetime. 12 have since destroyed themselves. 3 were absorbed by other powers. 2 survive in diminished form."
And humanity?
I understood what he was asking. Humanity was categorized as likely to self-destruct. We gave you a 73% probability of extinction within 2,000 years. 73%, Chen smiled, but there was no humor in it. That's actually lower than some of our own estimates from that period. We came very close, Coordinator, multiple times. There were moments when the survival of our species hinged on the decisions of a handful of individuals, when a single mistake could have ended everything. He turned to gaze at the Earth through the window. "But we're still here." "Yes," I said. "You are still here, and now we come to you, begging for aid. The irony is not lost on me, Ambassador." Chen returned his attention to me. "Tell me about the hierarchy. Not the military details, we have those. Tell me what they are, what they want, why they're doing this." I felt the old exhaustion settle deeper into my bones. The hierarchy is old, older than us. They emerged from a region of space we call the Dark Veil, beyond the galactic rim. For millennia they remained there, silent, unknown. Then, 40 years ago, they began to move. Move? Expand, consume. Every species in their path has been eradicated, not conquered, not subjugated, erased. They leave nothing behind, no survivors, no ruins, only empty worlds stripped of all organic matter. I shuddered at the memory of the intelligence reports, the images of worlds reduced to sterile rock. We do not know why. We have attempted communication. They do not respond. They simply advance and destroy, and advance again.
How many species have they destroyed?
That we know of? 7, including 2 that were older than the Velkari. I paused. There may be more. Many species in that region of space were not well documented.
Chen absorbed this in silence. Then he asked another unexpected question. Coordinator, what do you think humanity is?
I do not understand the question. Your people have been watching us for 4 centuries. You've seen us expand, fight, grow. You've analyzed our technology, our culture, our psychology. After all that observation, what conclusion have you reached? What are we? It was a trap. I could sense it, though I couldn't see the shape of it. Humanity is an anomaly, I said carefully. You develop faster than any species we have recorded. You adapt to circumstances that should destroy you. You form alliances with former enemies. You behave in ways that contradict your own apparent self-interest. I hesitated. We have theories, but none of them fully explain you.
Chen nodded, as if I had confirmed something he already knew. Would you like to know what we think we are? I inclined my head. We think we're survivors, Coordinator, that's all. Every other species in this galaxy evolved on worlds that were kind to them, stable climates, abundant resources, long periods of peace in which to develop civilization. He gestured toward the Earth. Our world tried to kill us, repeatedly. Ice ages, supervolcanoes, plagues, asteroid impacts. Our own history is a catalog of near-extinction events, and that was before we developed the technology to threaten ourselves. I am aware of your history. Then you know that we spent the first 10,000 years of our civilization fighting each other, constantly, brutally. We invented weapons specifically designed to kill other humans, then invented better weapons, then invented weapons that could destroy all life on our planet. We came within minutes of using them, multiple times. I nodded. This was all in our records. Your species has an unusual propensity for violence. Yes, Chen agreed, we do. But that's not the important part. He leaned forward, his pale eyes holding mine. The important part, Coordinator, is that we stopped. I waited for him to continue. Every time we reached the brink, we stepped back. Every time we developed a new way to destroy ourselves, we developed a new reason not to. We are not a peaceful species. We never will be. But we learned over centuries of blood and suffering how to direct our violence, how to control it, how to choose our enemies carefully and pursue them with absolute commitment. Something in his tone made the chill in my secondary nervous system intensify. What are you saying, Ambassador? Chen stood and walked to the window, his hands clasped behind his back.
I'm saying that humanity has experience with existential threats, Coordinator. We've faced them before. We've overcome them. And we've learned something that older, wiser, more stable species never had the opportunity to learn.
And what is that?
He turned back to face me, and for the first time I saw something behind his calm exterior. Something cold and hard and ancient, despite his brief human lifespan. How to fight when there is no alternative to victory.
The silence stretched between us. Outside, the earth continued its slow rotation, serene and blue and impossibly fragile.
The hierarchy, Chen said quietly. They're coming here, aren't they?
I closed my eyes. Yes. Our analysts believe they will reach Seoul within 3 years, perhaps less if our remaining fleet cannot slow their advance.
And you came to warn us?
We came to request aid, but yes, also to warn you. I opened my eyes and met his gaze. Ambassador, you must understand. The hierarchy has destroyed species far more powerful than yours. They have broken fleets that dwarfed anything humanity has ever fielded. If they reach Seoul, they will not negotiate. They will not accept surrender. They will simply erase you, Chen finished. Yes, you've made that clear. He was silent for a moment. Then, unexpectedly, he smiled. Coordinator, I have a confession to make.
A confession?
When your message first arrived requesting this meeting, there was considerable debate within our government about how to respond. Some argued we should refuse, that the Velkhari had ignored us for centuries and deserved no assistance now. Others felt we should extract maximum concessions from your desperation. A few even suggested that we should simply wait, let the hierarchy destroy your ascendancy, and then face them ourselves when they inevitably turned their attention to us.
I felt my manipulators tighten involuntarily. And what was decided?
I'm getting to that. Chen walked back to the table and sat down, his manner suddenly less formal. You see, Coordinator, the debate became moot fairly quickly, because the admirals pointed out something that the politicians had overlooked.
Which was that we've been preparing for this for over a century.
I stared at him. I do not understand. Chin folded his hands on the table. Coordinator, we've been watching the hierarchy since before they emerged from the Dark Veil. Our long-range observation posts detected their civilization over 300 years ago. We've been tracking their expansion, analyzing their tactics, studying their technology. We knew eventually they would turn toward the core of the galaxy, toward the established powers, toward us.
You knew? I couldn't keep the shock from my voice. You knew and you said nothing?
Who would we have told? The Velkhari, who considered us primitive and ignored every diplomatic overture we made for 2 centuries? The Confederation of Allied Systems, who actively tried to restrict our expansion? The Threnic Empire, who launched 3 separate attempts to subjugate our outer colonies? Chen shook his head. We learned very early, Coordinator, that the established galactic order had no interest in treating humanity as an equal. So we prepared, quietly, alone.
Prepared how?
Chen was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Come with me. There's something I think you should see." He led me through the station to a section I had not been shown before. The corridors here were different, wider, reinforced, with subtle markings that I recognized as military designations. We passed through 3 security checkpoints, each more stringent than the last, before finally emerging onto what I initially took to be another observation deck. Then I saw what I was observing, and the air froze in my lungs. Beyond the viewport,
stretching for thousands of kilometers in every direction, was a fleet. Not the scattered commercial traffic I had seen entering the system, not the modest patrol vessels that occasionally passed within sensor range. This was a war fleet of a scale I had never imagined any species could construct. Dreadnoughts the size of small moons hung in perfect formation, their surfaces bristling with weapons I could not identify. Carriers disgorged endless streams of strike craft in training exercises, the formations moving with a precision that spoke of years of practice. Support vessels clustered around the larger ships like schools of fish, while vast construction platforms continued to add to the already staggering numbers.
This, Chen said quietly, is the Sol Home Defense Fleet, one of 12.
One of... I couldn't finish the sentence. 12. Each of our core systems maintains a comparable force. The colonies have their own defense arrangements, though somewhat smaller in scale. He paused. And then there's the expeditionary fleet.
There's more?
Chen didn't answer directly. Instead, he gestured toward a particular section of the fleet, where a cluster of ships unlike any others hung motionless in space. They were larger than the dreadnoughts, darker, their shapes somehow wrong in ways I couldn't articulate. They seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it.
Those are our newest vessels, Chen said. We call them Silence Class. They're designed specifically for operations against the hierarchy. We've been building them for the past 50 years, based on everything we've learned about the enemy's capabilities. I stared at the dark ships, feeling a growing sense of unreality. How is this possible? Our intelligence indicated your military capabilities were significant, but not this. Your intelligence was based on what we allowed you to see, Chen said, not unkindly. Every species in the galaxy underestimated us, Coordinator. That was by design. We learned very early that being underestimated has significant strategic advantages. But the resources alone, the industrial capacity required. Humanity has been preparing for an existential war for over a century. Our entire economy has been structured around the assumption that this day would come. Every mining operation, every manufacturing facility, every research program has been optimized for one purpose: survival. Chen's voice was calm, matter-of-fact, as if he were describing the weather. We've made sacrifices that other species would consider unthinkable. We've delayed luxuries, diverted resources, focused our entire civilization on a single goal. And now... He trailed off, letting the vast fleet speak for itself. I stood in silence, trying to process what I was seeing, trying to reconcile this overwhelming display of military power with the humble utilitarian station where I had been received, trying to understand how a species we had dismissed as primitive, aggressive, and self-destructive had somehow built the most formidable war machine in galactic history. "Why?" I finally asked. "Why show me this?" Chen turned to face me, his expression serious. "Because you asked for help, Coordinator, and we're going to give it, but not for the reasons you think." "Then why?" "Because the hierarchy is not just coming for you. They're coming for everyone, every species, every world, every thinking being in this galaxy. Sooner or later, they'll reach Sol. We always knew that. We've always been preparing for that." He paused. "But we'd rather meet them out there, in the spaces between your worlds and ours, than wait for them to knock on our door." "You intend to fight them? For us?" "With you," Chen corrected. "Not for you. There's a difference." He gestured toward the fleet. We're going to war, Coordinator, and we'd like your surviving forces to be part of the combined command. You know the hierarchy better than we do. You've fought them, bled against them, learned their patterns. That knowledge has value. More value than any territory or technology you could offer.
I felt something I had not felt in months. Hope. Fragile, uncertain, but undeniably present. And in exchange,
you help us plan. You share your intelligence. You fight alongside us. Chen smiled, and for the first time the expression reached his eyes. And when this is over, if we survive, you remember that humanity was here when you needed us. That's all we ask.
I looked back at the fleet, at the countless ships that represented a species' total commitment to survival. The Council will have questions.
I'm sure they will. They can speak to me directly if they wish, but I should tell you, Coordinator, the decision has already been made. The expeditionary fleet departed 3 days ago. They'll reach the hierarchy's forward elements in approximately 2 weeks.
3 days ago? I spun to face him. Before we even arrived?
As I said, we've been preparing for this. Your arrival simply confirmed what we already knew. The time for preparation is over. The time for action has come. I thought of the hierarchy's unstoppable advance, the 18 worlds they had burned, the billions of Valkyrie who had died screaming as their civilization crumbled. You cannot imagine what they are, I said, what they do to the species they encounter. We have tried everything, every weapon, every strategy, every desperate gambit. Nothing has worked. Nothing has even slowed them significantly.
I believe you, Chen said. And I should tell you, Coordinator, that we don't expect this to be easy. We don't expect to win quickly or cleanly or without terrible cost. We may lose entire fleets. We may lose worlds. We may lose millions of our own people before this is done. His voice was steady, without bravado or false confidence. But we will not lose everything. Whatever the hierarchy is, whatever drives them, they have never faced anything like humanity.
They have never faced a species forged in the fire of self-inflicted extinction and emerged stronger for it.
How can you be so certain?
Chen was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Because we have no other choice, Coordinator. That's the secret of human survival. We have never had the luxury of accepting defeat. When our backs are against the wall, when extinction stares us in the face, something happens to us, something that other species seem to lack." He paused. "We become unreasonable. We fight when fighting is hopeless. We endure when endurance is impossible. We refuse to accept the inevitable. And somehow, not always, not easily, but somehow, we change what was inevitable into what merely was." I had no response to that. I could only stand there, watching the fleet that represented everything humanity had chosen to sacrifice for this moment, and wonder if I was witnessing salvation or simply a new form of catastrophe. The weeks that followed blurred together in a haze of activity. Ambassador Chen introduced me to the human military leadership, a group of officers whose calm professionalism masked a terrifying dedication to their purpose. They asked endless questions about the hierarchy, their ship configurations, their tactical patterns, their vulnerabilities, few, and weaknesses, fewer. Every scrap of intelligence we could provide was analyzed, discussed, and integrated into their war plans. I learned more about humanity in those weeks than in the previous 4 centuries of observation. I learned that their military doctrines emphasized flexibility over rigid hierarchy, that their officers were trained to make independent decisions in the chaos of battle.
I learned that their ships, for all their utilitarian ugliness, were designed with a redundancy that bordered on paranoia, multiple backup systems for every critical function, armor that seemed almost wastefully thick, weapons that could operate independently if central control was lost.
I learned that they had been preparing for this specific war for over a century, and that their preparation had been both meticulous and merciless.
But most of all, I learned about something they called the Deep Black Protocol.
It was Admiral Sarah Chen, Thomas's daughter, I later discovered, who had risen to command the expeditionary fleet, who explained it to me. We were in her flagship's command center, reviewing the latest intelligence on the hierarchy's movements, when she mentioned it almost casually.
If the fleet fails, she said, the protocol activates. Every human colony, every station, every vessel will receive the signal simultaneously. Within hours, the entire species will shift to survival mode.
Survival mode? She pulled up a display showing a map of human-controlled space. Red dots marked the location of what she called seed vaults, hidden facilities scattered across hundreds of star systems, each containing the genetic material and cultural records necessary to restart human civilization from scratch.
"We've hidden backup populations in places no one would think to look," she said. "Deep in asteroid fields, in the atmospheres of gas giants, in artificial habitats drifting between stars, powered by nothing but carefully hoarded fuel reserves. If the hierarchy destroys every visible trace of humanity, these seeds will remain. They'll wait, for centuries if necessary, until the threat has passed. Then they'll emerge and rebuild." I stared at the display, counting the red dots. There were thousands of them. "You planned for extinction."
"We planned for everything." Admiral Chen's voice was matter-of-fact. "That's what being human means, Coordinator. Hope for the best, prepare for the worst, and never, ever accept that any situation is truly hopeless."
The first reports from the front came 17 days after the expeditionary fleet's departure. I was in the command center when the courier drone arrived, carrying data too sensitive to transmit through normal channels. Admiral Chen's second-in-command, a man named Rodriguez, was the first to review the contents. I watched his face as he read, saw the flicker of something. Surprise? Concern? Before his expression smoothed back into professional neutrality. "The fleet has engaged the hierarchy vanguard," he announced. "Initial contact was made in the Velkari system of Kethmora." My hearts clenched. Kethmora had been a colony of 7 billion before the hierarchy arrived. Now I knew it was likely nothing but rubble and ash. "Casualties?" someone asked. Rodriguez hesitated for just a moment. "Significant. The hierarchy's forward elements were larger than anticipated. But the fleet has held position. They're establishing a defensive line across the main approach vectors." "Held position." I stepped forward, hardly daring to believe. "You stopped their advance?" "Slowed it," Rodriguez corrected. "The Admiral reports that the hierarchy's tactics are unusual. They fight without apparent regard for their own losses, but their technology, while advanced, has proven vulnerable to our Silence-class weapons platforms. We've destroyed approximately 40% of their vanguard force." 40%. In centuries of warfare, the Velkari had never inflicted such casualties on the hierarchy in a single engagement. I felt the hope that had been growing in my chest intensify into something almost painful. The updates continued to arrive over the following weeks. The news was not always good. There were losses, terrible losses, ships and crews who would never return. But the overall picture slowly became clear. The human fleet was doing something no other force in the galaxy had accomplished. They were fighting the hierarchy to a standstill. And then, slowly, inexorably, They began to push back.
I stood in the command center as the reports came in from the Battle of Valkaris Prime, the largest engagement of the war so far. Hundreds of ships on each side, weapons that lit up entire sectors of space, casualties that would have been considered catastrophic by any normal measure.
But the humans did not measure by normal standards.
"The hierarchy is retreating," Rodriguez announced, his voice carrying a note of barely suppressed excitement. "Admiral Chen is pursuing. She's ordering all available reserves to converge on their escape route."
Retreating. The hierarchy had never retreated before, not once in all the years of their inexorable advance. They attacked, they consumed, they destroyed, but they never withdrew. Until now.
What changed? I asked, turning to Rodriguez. What are you doing differently?
He was quiet for a moment, considering how to answer. Then he said, "We're not following their rules, Coordinator. Every other species that faced the hierarchy tried to fight a conventional war, defend your territory, protect your assets, minimize your losses. That's exactly what the hierarchy expects. It's what they're designed to overcome."
"And humanity?"
Humanity, Rodriguez almost smiled. Humanity is fighting a human war. We're not trying to defend anything. We're trying to destroy them, completely, utterly, no matter the cost. We've committed everything we have to a single goal, the total elimination of the hierarchy as a threat to all life in this galaxy.
I thought of the deep black protocol, of the seed vaults hidden throughout human space, of the cold, calculated preparation for extinction that underpinned everything humanity did. You've accepted the possibility of your own destruction.
We accepted that a long time ago, Coordinator. We've been living with that acceptance for centuries. It's liberating, in a way. When you've already faced the worst, when you've already made peace with the possibility of total annihilation, there's nothing left to fear. Nothing the hierarchy can threaten us with that we haven't already threatened ourselves.
The war continued for 3 more years. I remained in Sol for most of it, serving as a liaison between the remnants of the Valkari fleet and the human command structure. I watched as humanity threw everything they had into the conflict. Not just ships and weapons, but scientists and engineers, artists and philosophers, ordinary citizens who volunteered for the most dangerous missions because they believed the cause was worth dying for. I watched as they absorbed losses that would have broken any other species, and simply kept going, kept fighting, kept advancing, step by bloody step into the heart of hierarchy space. And I watched as, slowly but inevitably, the hierarchy began to collapse. The final battle took place in the Dark Veil itself, in the region of space from which the hierarchy had first emerged. By then, their fleet had been reduced to a fraction of its original strength, and human forces had been joined by the surviving ships of a dozen other species, races who had seen humanity's example and found the courage to fight back. I was there, on the bridge of a Valkari cruiser that had been integrated into the Allied command when the last hierarchy vessel was destroyed. I was there when Admiral Chen, promoted now to Supreme Commander of the combined fleet, broadcast the signal that marked the end of the war. And I was there when humanity, having saved the galaxy, simply stopped. They didn't demand tribute. They didn't claim territory. They didn't impose their will on the grateful species they had protected. They simply withdrew their fleets to their own space and announced that they were going home. I managed to speak with Admiral Chen one last time before she departed. She was older now, gray streaking her hair, lines of exhaustion carved deep into her face. 3 years of total war had taken their toll.
"Why?" I asked her. "You could have claimed anything.
The entire galaxy owes you its existence. You could have built an empire that would last for millennia."
She looked at me with something like pity. "That's not who we are, Coordinator."
"Then who are you?" She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "We're survivors, Coordinator. That's all we've ever been. We don't want to rule the galaxy. We don't want to be feared or worshipped or obeyed. We just want to live, to build our homes and raise our children and explore the universe on our own terms." She paused. "And we want everyone else to have that same opportunity, even the species who once looked down on us, even the civilizations who ignored us or attacked us or predicted our extinction."
That seems impossibly generous.
"Maybe," she smiled, and for a moment I saw the young officer she must have been before the weight of command and war settled on her shoulders. "Or maybe it's just practical. Empires fall, Coordinator. Every single one, throughout all of history, eventually collapses. But ideas can last forever. The idea that every thinking being deserves the chance to survive, to grow, to reach for the stars, that's worth more than all the territory in the galaxy." I thought about that for a long time after she left. I thought about the Valkyrie ascendancy, our tens of thousands of years of history, our careful maintenance of galactic order. We had seen ourselves as shepherds, guiding the younger races, maintaining stability through superior wisdom and power. And we had failed. When the true test came, when the hierarchy emerged from the darkness, all our wisdom and power had proven insufficient.
But humanity, primitive, aggressive, self-destructive humanity, had succeeded where we could not. Not because they were stronger than us, though they were. Not because they were smarter, though in some ways they clearly outmatched us, but because they understood something we had never learned. That true strength comes not from dominance, but from endurance. Not from superiority, but from adaptability. Not from the certainty of victory, but from the refusal to accept defeat. The hierarchy entered the Sol system 347 years after humanity first reached for the stars. They came with all the force that had crushed a dozen civilizations, with weapons that had burned 100 worlds, with the cold certainty of inevitable victory that had carried them across the galaxy. They expected another easy conquest, another species to consume, another silence to add to the void.
Instead, they found humanity waiting, not cowering, not fleeing, not even particularly concerned, just waiting, ready, prepared.
The war lasted 3 years. When it was over, the hierarchy was gone. Not just defeated, but erased as thoroughly as they had erased so many others. Their worlds were empty, their ships were wreckage, their very existence was reduced to historical records and cautionary tales. And humanity? Humanity went home. They rebuilt their losses, mourned their dead, and returned to the work of building the future they had fought so hard to protect. They didn't ask for gratitude. They didn't demand recognition. They simply continued. I am old now, old even by Valkyrie standards. My people are recovering, slowly, from the wounds the hierarchy inflicted. It will take centuries to rebuild what we lost, but we will rebuild. Thanks to the humans, we have that opportunity.
Sometimes I think about that first assessment report, the one I signed 400 years ago. Probability of natural extinction within 2,000 cycles, 73.6%. How confident we were. How certain of our own superiority. How utterly, catastrophically wrong.
The truth, I have come to understand, is that we never really understood humanity at all. We saw their violence and assumed they were primitive. We saw their internal conflicts and assumed they were unstable. We saw their short lives and assumed they were insignificant. What we failed to see was what those traits meant in practice. The violence made them dangerous. The conflicts made them adaptable. The short lives made them value every moment, fight for every scrap of survival, refuse to accept any defeat as final. The hierarchy entered the Sol system expecting to find a young, weak species, one more civilization to be consumed, one more voice to be silenced. They found something else entirely. They found a species forged in the fire of 10,000 years of self-inflicted struggle. They found a people who had stared into the abyss of their own extinction so many times that they had lost the capacity for despair.
They found humanity, and they never left.
Not because the humans destroyed them, though they did, not because the humans outfought them, though they certainly did that too, but because, in the end, the hierarchy encountered something they had never faced before, a species that simply refused to die, a species that had turned the art of survival into a science, a religion, a fundamental aspect of their being.
The stars are patient. They burn for billions of years, watching civilizations rise and fall. But they remember, I think. They remember the ones who endured, the ones who faced the darkness and refused to be extinguished. They will remember humanity, and so will we all. I am Kethvarani Seldris, last fleet coordinator of the Velkari Ascendancy. I have served my people for over 1,000 years. I have watched empires crumble and species vanish into the cosmic silence. I have seen wonders that most beings cannot imagine, and horrors that still wake me in the cold hours before dawn.
But of all the things I have witnessed in my long existence, nothing has moved me more than the sight of those human ships, ugly and utilitarian and utterly unstoppable, advancing into the darkness from which the hierarchy emerged.
They entered the Sol system, those ancient destroyers. They came with all the weight of inevitability, with all the terrible certainty of civilizations that had never known defeat.
And they never left.
Because humanity was waiting. Humanity is always waiting, patient, prepared, ready to face whatever darkness the universe can conjure. I understand now what Ambassador Chen meant all those years ago when he spoke of species forged in fire. I understand what it means to refuse the inevitable. I understand why the humans smiled, even as they went to war, even as they sacrificed everything they had built for a cause greater than themselves.
They smiled because they knew something the hierarchy never learned, something the Velkari, with all our ancient wisdom, had forgotten.
The void is cold, and the darkness is patient. But so are they. So are the children of Earth, the survivors of 1,000 self-inflicted apocalypses, the species that looked into the face of extinction and said simply, quietly, inevitably, not today. The hierarchy came to Sol expecting to find another victim.
They found, instead, their grave. And somewhere in the vast silence between the stars, I like to imagine that the universe itself took note, that the great cosmic void, which had watched so many species fade into nothingness,
paused in its eternal turning and acknowledged something it had never witnessed before.
A species that refused to go quietly. A civilization that fought not just for victory, but for meaning. A people who understood that the only defeat that matters is the one you accept.
They entered the solar system, the great destroyers, the ancient devourers, the inevitable darkness, and they never left.
Because humanity was there. And humanity endures. Always.